Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And I am done. So I just finished reading The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which is just now. So I love this book so much. This is an easy 5 out of 5 for me. And this is amazing because I normally don't reread books. This is a reread for me. I read this book for my first time about 10 years ago now. No, 8 years ago now, because I was on my honeymoon when I read it. And I hadn't read a ton of fantasy up to that point. You know, I had read A Song of Ice and Fire. I was kind of getting over that to the point where it's, you know, nothing's going to come out. I need to broaden my fantasy horizons a little bit. And I picked up the Kingkiller Chronicle, and I really liked it. I gave The Name of the Wind a 5 out of 5, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 because at the time I felt like it was a big step down in quality. Now, something has changed because I believe The Wise Man's Fear is a more enjoyable and better book than the first one. And I loved everything about this from the moment that I picked up the book, and I'm struggling to figure out exactly why. Because something's changed for me. And it's not that I haven't read the original book in this series in a while. I read it, you know, less than a year ago. So it's very fresh on my mind. Now, I happen to have read the first binding recently, which is a pathetic knockoff of A Name of the Wind. And so maybe my bar has been lowered for this style of book to the point where I was so open to this one. But I don't think that's what it is. I just think that everything about this book, you know, with the exception of a couple things, is superior. And it's not even close for me. And it's weird because I look at this and I know that that's an unpopular opinion. I very commonly hear from people that love the first one and like the second one, kind of like I was when I first read these books. And so what's different? You know, I remember why I gave it a 4 out of 5. You know, I found that there was this section of the book that bogged down, and it was, without spoiling anything, it's this weird, like, sex-fueled part of the book that feels off-putting, and it does drag, and that's true. I remember it, but what I remembered when I read it the first time was that it went on and on and on for hundreds of pages. This is not a short book. And that it was extremely long. Now, that's not true. It was, I want to say it's like 60 or 70 pages long, and then we get right back into it. So that was not even close to enough to drag down the story for me. But even those sections, I still found enjoyable. I would just say that like those sections were like a 4 out of 5 for me, where the rest of the book was a top tier 5. But, you know, this book started out at a much better place than the first one started out. The first one started out with a lot of that classic fantasy slow build-up, where you're really into the meat of the story because you have to learn about these characters. You have to learn these characters' backstory. And so I found the first third of The Name of the Wind, even though I gave it a 5 out of 5, even on my reread, was a bit of a drag. And that's hundreds of pages long. It wasn't until and I don't want to ruin anything. If you happen to be watching this without reading the first one, which apparently some viewers do, I'll just say that there is a point in the story where it's clear that that's the meat. And I won't say anything more than that, but you know, that's quite a bit into the book. This book starts off hot, and you know, it starts off hot because the plot is a lot tighter. We don't need to recognize the characters anymore. They're in their familiar settings. We get to learn a lot more about them, but they start right into it in a much more enjoyable place for me. You know, the writing quality has not changed. And when I say that, I mean it is a top tier, one of the best writing quality performances from an author that I've ever had the pleasure of reading. Patrick Rothfuss is a genius. He writes so incredibly, it feels like it just flows off from pen to paper. Now, I know that's not how he writes, though. He, you know, has rewrites and rewrites and rewrites. He likes to perfect every single word in here. But it comes off so natural. And it's, you know, if I was the type of reader who would underline impactful, really memorable lines, I would permanently have a highlighter in my hand because that's how frequent he busts this out. And you almost get used to it to a point where I know that when I pick up my next read, no matter what it is, it's going to feel like that writer is not very good. And that's just a testament to how good Rothfuss is. He puts everyone else to shame, with very few exceptions. So that was right up to the standard quality. But then the stories that he goes into, the way that this book happens, and I think the first one as well, is it's really split up into, these major storylines within a book, because he goes on these adventures. And this one has a lot more of that than the first one, because this book is about, you really get to see why the main character is a legend. And because all of these events are happening, and as they're happening, it has that old school way of, this is before the internet and TV and phones and newspapers. This is at the time when spoken word is the way that news travels. And so this character who has these, admittedly enormous deeds to their name, when they get, word of mouth and, the game of telephone, runs its course, these stories are larger than life. And so this is the book we find out, why he is so legendary. And it's fun to read these stories that made him who he is. And, I want to say there's like 5 or 6 major arcs in this story that we go through. And they're all just extremely enjoyable. We bounce, from story to story to story with basically nothing in between. He's trying to get from point A to point B because of an event that happens at the beginning of this book. And in classic, book form, it doesn't go that way. And he keeps getting sidetracked and we start going on these other tangents. But it's just straight enjoyable. I love everything about this. But that's not the only thing about this book that's wonderful. The lore here, the mystery, the fantasy aspect to this, where we're trying to piece together what's going on here and why in the greater story. There's a lot more questions here than answers. And so it makes the third book going to have to be a lot more answers than questions, because the third one's supposed to be the final one. And the third book is in that George R. R. Martin realm of nobody's sure if it's ever actually going to come out, because the progress feels very slow. I look at 3 authors in this realm of, are they ever going to actually finish their series? And the 3 are George R. R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss, and Scott Lynch. Scott Lynch does the Gentleman Bastard series. But it feels like Rothfuss is going to be the last one to come out with their next book. Because, I've heard nothing in terms of progress other than him reading a prologue chapter. And that's nothing. I mean, if you've only written a prologue chapter, and I don't think he has, I think, in my opinion, he's probably written this book, but he's in that amazingly huge rewrite phase. And maybe that'll go forever, because that's just his style, is he wants to perfect it. And having to, finish the series out in one book, that's not going to be easy. And he won't leave himself any gaps here for any room to go. He has to finish it. And so, I've heard some people say that he's boxed himself in a corner. He's asked too many questions, but I don't think so. I mean, at the end of this book, I'm now at this point where I get who this main character is, why they are as important as they are, and really all that happens to happen in this last book is some knots need to be tied off, and they're big knots, but it doesn't even need to be a huge book for it to be able to accomplish the goals that are set out for it. So I think it's a very, I have a lot of faith that this last book is going to knock it out of the park, and that it will successfully tie off the story in a wonderful way, because he's really, set himself up for success here. And yeah, I can't think, positively enough about, the path that's gone on up until this point. And it's just a really magnificent job. I don't want to just belabor this point, but this is a very special book. And, I think there's going to be some people watching this that have this opinion that I've heard time and time again, that, well, it may be a good book. I don't want to read this book until the last one comes out, because I don't want to get burned. I don't want another A Song of Ice and Fire thing to happen where, I've wasted my time with a story that's never going to get a conclusion. And, everybody has an opinion that matters to them. But for me, that is a ridiculous perspective, because that perspective would tell you that, A Storm of Swords is not a good book because the ending to that story was not completed. And that's ludicrous to me. Just in that realm, it would tell you that these books are worthless without an ending. And that's totally ridiculous. If the third book never came out, that wouldn't diminish what these books are. It would still be an amazing journey. I would be sad that it never finished, sure, but I would always still look at these books in an amazingly positive light. And so if you're watching this and you do have that mindset, I would plead with you to maybe think about that again and say, why do I have to have an ending for me to appreciate the books that went up to that point? And I would posit that you do not have to have that ending. Now, you may be sitting there saying, Matt, you're wrong. I'm not. I'm not wrong for me. Maybe I'm wrong for you. But, I think it's a a tough box to put yourself into, especially as a fan of fantasy, where a lot of series will not get endings, or a lot of series like, you know, a Stormlight archive by Brandon Sanderson, that you're not going to be reading those series for another 20 years when that series is planned on being finished. So anyways, I don't want to go on that point anymore, but yeah, I just can't sympathize with that perspective. And I certainly, you know, this book didn't knock me out of that in the slightest. You know, I did find that the things that I didn't like as much about book one just weren't here. There is a character named Ori, or Ari, that is a fan favorite. You know, if I asked, you know, 100 fans of this book and the series who their favorite character was, I would get a handful of people that would say that character, but I didn't enjoy that. And that character was way diminished here. I didn't get almost any of that. And, you know, that's amazing right there. It's just a character that I can't, you know, sympathize with. And it's just kind of weird for the sake of being weird. Or maybe I'm not smart enough to really figure out what's going on there. But yeah, it didn't work for me. So I didn't have to go through that. And that's amazing. I just got all of the things that I do like in a fantasy book. And, you know, the fantasy aspects were ramped up. You know, we got more of that. We got to see more of the magic system here. The characters are just amazing. We got, you know, even more characters because there's more little journeys here. And they're all equally interesting. The plot was even better. The writing quality was just as good. You know, all of the components here that I would think of an amazing book were evident here. Now, I realized that there's a lot of spoilers I could be saying, and maybe I should have done a spoiler-filled review because this book has been out for so long that I feel like almost everybody has probably read this. But if you want to talk spoilers with me and you want to go into detail, come join the Discord channel. There's a link down below. Head over to the Kingkiller Chronicle room, and I will be there to engage with you and talk to you about theories, more details in a spoiler-filled fashion, and we can have that back and forth that you may be looking for out of this review. So hopefully I can fill that in for you. So I'm going to end it there. This book's incredible. It's might go down as my favorite or one of my favorite reads of 2023, even though it's kind of cheating for a reread, but I'm going to count it. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Sky, Russell, Ron Reich, Romeo Mike, CJ, My Book is Lit, and Jamie.